Hi, welcome to Professor Bill's science class, where we learn about nerdy science stuff. Hey, Sohan, what do you want to learn about today?
I want to learn about why stuff blows up.
Good idea. We should probably learn about nuclear energy. AK, what do you know about nuclear energy?
I know a lot actually. Google. Oh yeah. Okay. So nuclear energy is basically when you get like there's like random stuff happens, right? And you get like extra arms and extra legs.
Not quite. So nuclear energy is a form of energy where energy is harnessed by the fission or fusion of atoms. Unlike other forms of energy like fossil fuels or renewable energy, nuclear energy is not created by chemical processes, but instead by nuclear processes. And then unlike a chemical process where electrons are merely swapped between atoms, in a nuclear process, the atoms themselves physically change, meaning that they gain or lose neutrons and protons. This is far more energetic than chemical reactions. Because of this, nuclear reactions can release far greater amounts of energy with far less amounts of matter being used. So typically, nuclear energy is harnessed for energy generation using a nuclear reactor. In a nuclear reactor, special radioactive substances like uranium-235 are essentially basically bombarded with neutrons. This causes them to split apart, which releases tremendous amounts of energy. With said energy generates lots of heat, which is then used to turn water into steam. The steam then powers an electrical turbine that generates electricity. Typically, to control the energy output, special neutron absorbing rods called control rods are lowered into the reactor. Depending on the depth and the number of rods in the reactor itself, plant operators are able to control the power output of the nuclear power plant.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Professor Sohan's lecture today on the public outcry regarding nuclear energy and its effects.
All right, almost got him, bro. I'm almost getting the win.
Hey, AK, what do you think you're doing? Answer my question. What do you think is an example of a public outcry regarding nuclear energy? Or what do you think the overall opinion is?
I think people love nuclear energy because it gives us electricity.
You're not wrong, but let's see what Bill has to say. Bill, get off your phone. What
What did you say?
What do you think the public outcry is regarding nuclear energy?
I think the public likes nuclear energy. I think they like growing extra limbs and arms.
Oh, because for war, right? To blow like countries up like Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you're actually you're on the right track. It has something to do with mutation for sure. But yeah, let's dive into it. So, despite having a very clean track record relative to other forms of power generation, nuclear energy has received far more negative attention from the public. So this differs from what you guys said, but there's still people who believe that it's still good. So one major issue with nuclear energy is that its negative consequences are not detectable by human senses. Radiation, for example, is completely undetectable. As such, people rightfully tend to be far more skeptical of radiation and its effects. So federal regulators have already cited SCE for several safety issues, including leaking radioactive waste and falsified fire watch records. But when a new steam generator began leaking a small amount of radioactivity in 2012, just 1 year after it was replaced, it was the SCE's most serious problem yet. It kind of shows that despite other forms of replacements, it still has a pretty bad and large effect. A subsequent report from the NRC's Inspector General found federal inspectors had overlooked red flags in 2009 and that SCE had replaced its own steam generators without proper approval. So SCE tried to fix the problem, but decided in 2013 to shut the plant down for good. So now I'm going to dive into the local issue. Bill or AK, do any of you guys know about any local issues in San Diego regarding nuclear energy and the public outcry?
I do. I remember a few years ago, they shut down the San Onofre nuclear power plant because of just a small radiation leak.
I knew that, for the record. I knew that.
So both of you are actually right. So an example would be California's San Onofre State Beach, which is what Bill just said, which is just north of the coastline of San Diego. So there's about 2 million visitors who flock every year. So due to the nuclear waste and nuclear radiation that was underground, the data has pointed out that there's atmospheric radiation releases that were at 0.0000371 MREM, which stands for millirems, which is basically a standard of measuring radiation.
Maybe.
Sohan, are you sleeping in my class?
No.
That's what I thought. Okay, guys. In our previous lesson, we learned that nuclear energy can have certain detrimental effects, such as the fact that it leaves radioactive uranium-235 and reactor fuel, and that's really bad. How much nuclear waste do you guys think is in the world right now? So, Bill, what do you think?
No, me.
Sohan, go ahead.
6.7 billion tons.
That's a huge number, but that's not exactly it. What do you think?
1 pound.
1 pound?
Yes.
No, unfortunately, that weighs less than my cat, bro. Realistically, in the world right now, we have 250,000. That's right, 250,000 metric tons of nuclear waste, and in the United States alone, that's 90,000. So what does that tell us? That tells us that we need to solve this problem quickly and efficiently. One way to do this is a method called transmutation. What transmutation does, if you look in that picture to your left right there, we essentially bombard neutrons into radioactive toxic waste. What that essentially does is it essentially allows these radioactive atoms or materials to undergo fission so that they can become isotopes. As a result of that, these nuclear wastes won't be as toxic anymore. And to actually prove this claim, there's a lab called Springer link, and with the team of scientists, they basically created a research paper that shows the merit of this. But I know what you guys are thinking. You guys are like, oh, what can I do, right? Bill, what do you think you can do to limit?
I can eat the nuclear waste.
What did you say? Sorry?
I can eat the nuclear waste to make it disappear. Right? Is that a good idea?
Unfortunately, Bill, I don't think you're gonna live a long, happy life if that happens. What do you think, Sohan?
I think you can bury it underground and make sure that no one sees it, because I think there's no effects when it's underground.
That's actually correct, but there are more things that you can do. For example, let's just go back to basics. We know that the reason we have nuclear power plants is to create electricity, right? So what we can do is lower the amount of electricity that we use. So for example, in order to decrease electricity, we can turn off the lights when we're not using it, or we can install automatic light sensors. So again, we conserve the amount of electricity. We can use more natural lights, like opening our blinds, and so on and so forth. Like that, you, Sohan, Bill, and everyone else watching can save and help the planet out. All right, guys, we're going to be talking about the hypothesis right now. So the hypothesis is going to be under the topic of transmutation. Yo, hold up, wait. There's like, you guys see some random person joining Zoom? Hello?
Is it a ghost?
What's going on?
If you don't give me your social security number, your computer will literally blow up in your face. Okay.
Who is this?
Give me your social security number.
Is this Zoom tech support?
This is
Oh,
Zoom tech support.
I trust you. My social security number is 460 24 37.
You are lying. You are lying. I want your actual social security number.
This is not okay. I have to. Oh, he left. Okay, guys, class is gonna resume again. All right, that was interesting, but let me continue. So hypothesis is, if transmutation increases, that means that less animals are affected by radiation, right? What that will entail is that we would have a higher population of species, which means that the allele frequencies will increase because there's a higher population and more animals will be able to breed. As a result of that, the species diversity increases, and as a result of that, the ecosystem will be more healthy, and there will be a higher ecosystem tolerance. So what that means is that the whole ecosystem will flourish as a result of more transmutation.
All right, class. Welcome to Professor Sohan's lesson today on the financial aspect of nuclear energy. Today, we're going to be focusing on the finances and the cost for denuclearizing areas. So the first example can be seen with transmutation, which was seen in the hypothesis. So we have 15 billion, which is the cost for all nuclear sites to be denuclearized, divided by 3,700, which is the number of nuclear sites that there are in America. So we get this number here, and that's the approximate cost for a single nuclear radioactive site to be denuclearized through transmutation. So another alternative to transmutation can be decommissioning a site, which is basically, in other words, making a nuclear site completely inoperative. So 2,000 sites can be dismantled or decommissioned in the U.S. So that cost can range anywhere between $1.07 million to 1.22 million, depending on the size of the site. So that if we add both numbers and divide by 2, we get the average cost of dismantling one nuclear site. This number may be higher or lower, but ultimately depends on the size of the site. So it's not perfect, but it's a pretty close estimate of how much it's going to cost. So in order to raise this money to dismantle or stop the nuclear site from expanding through transmutation, we need to enact like a tax policy to get money. So we can get 57 billion. It can be raised if environmental tax revenue equates 3% of the total US GDP. So this established percentage of GDP can rise exponentially in the years to come. So an example of how it can affect animals, as seen in our hypothesis, can be seen with the Chernobyl nuclear site, which is where 20,000 cubic meters of radioactive waste was there, and the forest covers 70%. So if we take 70% of 20,000, we get 14,000 cubic meters that are intaken by the forest. So the transmutation aspect would be 20,000 cubic meters of radioactive waste times 3,700, which is the cost per cubic meter. And this value here gets you the cost raised through the same concept of tax policy.
Radiation can cause rapid mutations in the genes of organisms. Because radiation is essentially made of high energy particles like gamma rays, they can travel through many layers of matter. This makes radiation very deadly for organisms because it can not only damage the exterior but the interior as well. Because larger organisms tend to have more genes, they're more negatively affected by radiation. This will result, if large amounts of radiation are leaking to the environment, this will result in most of the upper echelons of the population food web dying. This could result in primary consumers like rodents exploding population as they have less predation.
Okay, I'm going to be talking about interactions between different species and the environment, which essentially will show how humans can alter natural systems. So there's actually a dark side to nuclear energy. Nuclear energy, in a way, does actually release CO2 because, as we said before, uranium-235 is the power generator, right? And mining for uranium-235 is very intensive, and it produces CO2 in the environment and can also have radioactive dust and it can have water pollution as well. The connection between Bill's part and my part essentially shows us that humans can create disturbances in the Earth system, whether it's through the atmospheres by mining uranium or by contaminating different ecosystems through radiation.
Is that it?